Welcome, everyone. This is Denny with Wise is True. And with a long hiatus in interviews, I finally found somebody worth talking to for my YouTube channel. And I probably shouldn't put it that way, but on the other hand, I'm serious because my guest is Jeff, who I heard after he made a comment on a video that I'd done quite a while ago with Ron. And Ron told his story. They have similar stories. Ron's from a different generation, but Jeff saw that video, left a comment, and he sent me a video that he had done on BitChute, and I watched it. And then as a result of that, I asked Jeff to join me, and so he's out in his car. He's got his earbuds in, and we're ready to go. So thank you, Jeff, for joining me and talking with me tonight.
My pleasure, sir.
All right, so you will have seen a little intro about Jeff, kind of briefly setting the stage, but we're just going to jump right into it. And I'm interested to ask you first of all, was that BitChute movie your first public, I guess, exposure of your situation, what you have seen in your life?
Absolutely.
Okay,
And I wanted to do it live because I knew I had to get comfortable with it.
right.
And precisely why I chose that moment, Denny, just one piece. I've thought about it, thought about it, thought about it, and I had enough of a support group in Facebook. It's a private group that I started with the people over the last number of years that have been my anchor, that have been my guides, my mentors. One gentleman's my hero. And I said, okay, now things are in place. And I just sat down and I had a couple of things that I knew I wanted to say. And then I just opened up my mouth and whatever came out, came out.
Yeah,
I hope there's potency to it.
I thought you did a really good job.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
It was it. Yeah.
so what
Yes.
why did you so was there some trepidation for you about doing that, or it was just the time was right?
It was, targeting. And, it's for me, its roots going back to the whole late 60s, 70s. I'm always a little trepidatious because there are always words that shut people down. So I try to sort of do an end run around them to keep them with me. But I can't do that right now because nothing occurs to me. But the MKUltra, which had 80 sub projects, 80 or actually more than 80, but there were in 80 institutions around the country, a minimum of 80 hospitals, um, jails, certainly anything neuropsychiatric. When I see that term, I think, oh boy.
Yeah,
And so, yeah, so that was the genesis of it for me.
right.
And then I'm a little nervous, so feel free to rein me in. There's no ego here. It's
Okay.
not about me.
Yeah.
And so what was the question was, why did because I lived in fear for 9 years. I'm not trying to imply that all of a sudden I'm this fearless entity,
Right, right.
but I had enough experience. I wasn't there. There have been some attempts here and there that seemed like finality was the objective, but it didn't work. Um, I've been able to support some people online. There's a young man going through a similar situation in Utah who I think the world of, and I try to support him. I have friends in other parts of the country. I think some even overseas. Um, and I just started building myself up. I started feeling or being realizing that I'm not just this silent, towering entity that's looking around every corner. So I was tired of being afraid. When you're targeted, it takes its toll. When I try to give it the most important thing for me and the most effective thing, because it's so easy as it's designed to be to make you sound crazy. It when you describe it, it'll mirror every single, well, almost all of the symptoms of schizophrenia.
Right.
You know, and then whatever, and then you figure out the rest from there. So I'm very careful to be very cogent and to give it a context, yeah, and to demystify it.
Right.
The demystification and the context to me actually make some headway. And
Right.
if you could and remind me, please. There's something that's fairly important that I wanted to say regarding one of my therapists. Not one of mine. I don't have a triage of therapists, but my, you know, and that's because that's interesting. But yeah, so the context for me, I start is with this is with the targeting, the mind control, the ritual abuse, the whole trauma-based mind control is I don't go there. I don't go there first thing. I when it comes up, I'll start with like the Stasi, and I'll say this is not a huge thing. It's not a surreal, otherworldly thing, though there are that aspect.
Yeah. Right.
But I just don't go there. So I try to structure a very sane, cohesive, I don't know, well-structured argument for its reality.
Right.
And sometimes I'm successful and sometimes I'm not. Because when I say these things, Denny, if I say to you, when I leave the house and if I can't go a block or two without a couple of cars coming at me with one light, only one headlight, I sound nuts. I sound nuts to me. It leaves my mouth and comes back into my head, and I'm going, oh, what's the deal with that?
Yeah.
But it's true, and people will, as soon as they walk past you, and I know how that sounds, Denny, and I hope I'm not discrediting myself with any viewers.
No, and I always tell people, so if you want to know about ascension, UFOs, and ETs, study mind control first. It'll save a lot of time.
Yeah.
And although that's not a direct corollary to what you're talking about, it still applies. I mean, it's an area where most of us don't have much education, but we think we can delve into those things without having first exposing ourselves to that education and then feeling qualified to make some kind of judgments about it, And that's what I realized that I was doing when I was studying those particular subjects. And I started to run into people who said that they had been abducted by ETs or they were part of the secret space program. And that was my introduction to the MKUltra phenomenon. And I understood that I had to know something about screen memories. I had to know something about a multiple personality, what was once known as multiple personality disorder, because all of those things applied. And then the dots started connecting in a way that wasn't just me forcing puzzle pieces together.
Yeah.
They were real connections. Yeah.
Oh, completely. I mean, qualitative, forensic level connections.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so I hope I didn't cut you off there.
No. I mean, that's all I wanted to say. I mean, just so. Why do I think your testimony is valuable for people is because there's an insight that you have into the real world reality that will benefit not only people who have had the similar experiences as yours, but everyone, because everyone through mind control has been closed off to those perceptions.
Yeah, very much.
Which will give you a more accurate view of the world than the one you're currently experiencing. That's my contention, and so that's why when we started this thing, I said your testimony is more valuable than a lot of the other people that I could be interviewing right now, just for that reason. And if anybody expresses any kind of interest in that aspect of what I'm talking about, I often refer them to Elisa E's second book, where she's a very extreme example and a very graphic example of someone with an experience similar to yours. And there's a certain place in that book, and she wrote 2 books. The second book, in that second book, there's a section there where she talks about what's the ramifications for everyone on the earth, alive on the earth right now, for her experience and why it should matter to everyone on the earth. And it was so well done. I'd never read anything like that before. But that became for me like the holy grail. So whenever I run into someone like you with those experiences, I want to hear more about it. And especially for the listeners, because before we started the interview, you and I were talking, and I said, I said, most of the people with experiences like yours will never sit down on BitChute and do a 20-minute video talking about the things that you talked about. They just won't. But a lot of those people might see your video and be benefited from the fact that you actually had the guts and the ability to explain what you've experienced.
Thank you. And that's the hope.
Yeah.
Because the interesting thing is, I don't want to just focus on targeting, because a lot of times I've noticed that people will park themselves on what, and I don't mean this, critically, just it's human nature, on what you're experiencing in the moment, on what's
Right.
triggering you, on the monster that's knocking on your window door. That's what you want to go, tell everybody about. But there's much more. I think some people, sure, they might have, and I've heard this from a lot of people I trust, they piss somebody off, or they own some land, or they have some money, or it's inheritance, or all those things. And that can initiate targeting. But I think there's a lot of us, a great number of us, that it's a different story, that the root goes far back into the past. Oh, I just want to quickly, for like 2 seconds, now my face is split now. It looks like in here, like in the shadow and in the dark. So I just wanted to, when you're targeted, you become very, very, very aware of everything. And that's like a classic thing. And I can tell you, I am not Illuminati. I have a left side. It's not, I will answer any question. I will be happy to, if anybody wants to send me an email, anything. I made peace with the fact that I might not be here for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been a very tough 50, almost 53 years, or 53 in May. And, it's okay. It's not like this world is becoming such a paradise that I'm going to miss everything. No.
Right.
Maybe I'll miss being dragged up by mine and forcibly vaccinated by a drone or something like that.
Right.
So I'm with if it has to end now, I'm good with that.
Yeah.
I am. And I do think that when we go through any kind of horror in life, there's like this wacky seed for empathy and for the potential for the redemption of that horror.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that only comes, or for me, when you take it and you, like you so perfectly stated, when you present it out there, when you give it to somebody else, you're saying you're not alone. You're saying I see, and you're not alone.
Right.
Because targeting, it's a deprivation program. That it's in the deprivation of spiritual, emotional, and physical.
Right.
And then they deprive you of your life often. In cases like this, too, where there was that programming and there was an investment made and an agenda planned out for you.
Right.
And then deviate, like Fritz Springmeier says, who his books are invaluable to anybody. Oh, my God. And I've gone back and forth online with him a number of times, even on Facebook Messenger back when I was in the Bronx, when I couldn't even walk the street. And he was there for me like every second that day. So I get a little emotional, so forgive me.
No, that's okay. I mean, that was one of the first books I read too, the Fritz Springmeier book, that opened up my eyes and made me realize what I was dealing with when I was learning all this stuff about people making outrageous claims, and I was believing the stories that they said because I don't know why, but I just did. I just didn't think. Part of the thing is like, what could you possibly gain by telling some of these stories? And there's nothing. I mean, you lose credibility. There's places that they won't hire you if something like that's about you is public. And so, like, if you look at it from like motive, means, and opportunity, and all the the deductive reasoning that you might employ in trying to come up with a rationale for that, you need to pay attention to it. There's a few people out there just making up stories, no doubt. But for a large number of them, they are actually giving an accurate presentation of their experience. So, and I think this was the kind of thing that was compelling to authors like Jacques Vallée, 35 years ago, almost 40 years ago. And he hooked up with Barbara Bartalik and people like, Carla Turner started coming, doing public speaking and talking about some stuff that was just beyond belief. But
Yeah.
they turned out to be really credible whistleblowers, if you will. And so let's wake up, everybody.
I mean, it's because if we ask ourselves, I mean, MK Ultra, it's interesting. It's so interesting to me, Danny, because that came out, like, was it in Congress or I forget, in the Senate, in the Church Committee?
Yeah,
in
the mid
and
'70s.
yeah, I think it was 73 that, and it was the director of the CIA then was Helms.
Helms, right?
And yeah, and he ordered, God knows, all the files destroyed. Everything. I think a box escaped, thank God.
Yeah.
But my God, people are hammering on Snowden and Assange, and God love those men. I do. But Helms destroyed an entire thing. And you know what the consequences were? They made him the ambassador to Iran. Boy, I'll tell you. I bought him a hell of a lunch too. It's beyond me. They're so protected.
Yeah.
But I think what does happen is eventually, the circumstantial becomes forensic after a while.
Yeah.
And there is, because of just the weight of it.
Yeah.
And there is truth here. I mean, like, of course, there's going to be disinformationists that come in to try to make us. That's standard operation. That's a fly. It doesn't even matter. But there are thousands, and I would say tens of thousands of people who, the majority of which are probably, well, they're either dead, in psychiatric hospitals, in jail, or still undercover, or still not aware.
Right.
They're in that life, where they, and this, I don't want to sound too crazy quickly, but that's okay. Where they have a wife that was arranged, they have a job that was arranged for them. I wasn't married, but I was in a relationship for 4 years that was a fabrication, and I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
And a job that was remarkable, and but also handed to me,
right,
with a questionable agenda behind.
And one thing that I do need to mention, and if you don't want to talk about it, it's fine. If you want to talk about it, that's great. But you were kind of like among the tendrils of a very interesting octopus on the East Coast. There was a lot of like notable people in this genre that you had connections with in one way or another, and actually spanning a lot of events that occurred, if my memory serves, going all the way back into the Kennedy era up into more recent newsworthy things, people's names and events that would be recognizable to most people, and I think that's very interesting, because I think for a lot of people who've had experience like you, they can tell similar stories, because it's a connected world. That whole MK Ultra thing is connected to people who influence our culture, put it that way, that have a big influence on our culture.
They do.
Yeah.
And well, maybe this is a good time then to I'll back up quickly, and let's just jump in. I was born during a solar eclipse, but it was I forget the term now, where they induced the birth.
Okay.
Because it was time to take place. And Denny, I've always had a facility, for esoteric or occult information, which just means hidden. Doesn't necessarily mean, satanic and child sacrifice.
Right.
So I was asking astrologers that I respected. I was searching online. What is it with? Because I'm not saying I'm anything special, but I know I was watching a documentary last week. The things that fill the gaps for us will come to us when we're least aware. They just as gifts, because whether our heart's in the right place or the powers that be hate this program too, because it's destroying souls and people. So I was watching a David Icke, when it was brilliant 8-hour telecast, and I mean, I know some people don't like him, and I'm just saying the information for me was the piece. And it was talking about Saturn. And I'm looking
Okay.
around to something out there, no big deal. And I saw the different symbols for Saturn. And then I started, and the astrologer, somebody had sent me something, or I found something the night before about my birth that I went to. And so I'm looking at Saturn, and the video that was sent to me was how of the, I guess it was at the sun, and I'm a little nervous now. Well, of the eclipse,
Right.
and I saw it. It takes a shape of like a one eye at one
Yes.
point,
Yes.
and I was holy shit. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I said, oh, I didn't know if that was
No, no,
going to get
you're
it.
cool.
Okay. Oh, a one-eyed car, one headlight. Oh, that had two. It had two. I was wrong. That's the
Okay.
height that comes. And so I realized that you know it's symbolic of having an eye watching you. I'm sure
Yeah.
there's more to it,
Yeah.
but that I was born with that Masonic Saturnian one eye over my birth.
Right.
It made a lot of sense. And also, it's interesting that the doctor who delivered me, he lived across the street from my grandparents' house, and my mother, my father, we lived just a couple of minutes or two, a few minutes around the corner. So that was a huge piece for me.
And this was
And
in New
that was,
York.
I'm from Westchester County in New York.
Okay.
Just from a town called Mount Vernon. I'll put that out there. I
Okay.
try to push past any discomfort I have, because F it. This is not about me. This life is not about me.
Right.
It's, about people suffering in silence now that don't have anybody like you to help and talk to. So that was a piece of the puzzle. So from the ages of 0 to 3, some of this is going to be supposed because I don't remember. I lived with my mother and father. When I was 3, my dad left. I didn't meet him until 15 or 16, and then we've only seen each other a few times. But I do love him very much. I want to say that. And so from 3 to 6, I supposedly lived with my grandparents. I have a lot of memories there. But a lot of these little gaps, if you read like Fritz's books, this is when they'll like 18 months, they'll traumatize you around the age of 3. And these were the exact time. I thought, well, that's kind of circumstantial too. Who knows? So, like I was saying, the circumstantial becomes forensic after a while.
Right.
And so between 6 and, why don't we just slide into screen memory? That's just coming up into my mind now. I've had from the youngest ages I can remember to now 3 memories that I think I said in a note, like the Rock of Gibraltar. They were never changing. They didn't fade with time.
Right.
They were just fixed in my mind.
Right.
And I could tell you them very quickly, and how I've always remembered them until recently. The first one was I was in my grandfather's bedroom in his house, and I guess I was about 18 months to somewhere in there, and all that was in his room was I guess they had them like it called them a playpen, or it was like a white square with those bars around it.
Yep.
See where I'm going maybe with this?
Yep.
And I'm holding on to the little bars, and I'm looking at his door, waiting for. I'm getting emotional. Waiting for somebody, and I was waiting for. In my heart, it was a nurse that I loved and meant something with security and warmth to me. And I'm just hanging on, staring at the door, just staring. And I was going over that, and I thought, okay, my grandfather's room was never without furniture since the 30s, so that couldn't be that. And then I thought, that's a cage. You're holding the bars of a cage. Whew. And that was something. And I questioned it at first, but a deeper part of me, and the fact that I had for so many years been reading about these things, it just clicked.
Right.
And then the second one was that same woman that I was waiting for, the nurse, she was present at my birth. I don't know how that. And when I remembered that memory, I was kind of as if I was kind of like, imagine they had those like operation on the auditorium for the doctor to sit in,
Yeah.
and they looked down,
Right.
and it was like I was kind of floating. I wasn't seated. I was about maybe 15, 18, whatever feet in the air, looking down on my berth.
Right.
Now that's a kind of a very disassociative place
Yeah.
where you're outside of yourself. You're removed from, I guess, the trauma of being born.
Yeah.
And
And
but
then-
it was the third, yeah.
And that's something you'll learn about if you read books like what Fritz wrote about, is that is the beginning of the partitioning of the personality for survival's sake. The trauma gets to a point, the consciousness knows how to check out and disassociate, and that's one of the signposts of that, of having occurred, is having an out-of-body experience, witnessing it from a separate perspective.
Yeah.
So
That's beautifully said. And who knows if it was my birth that I was watching, or some other form of, and this just
Right.
occurred to me right now, by the way, or
Right.
some other kind of whatever.
Right.
And the third one was the interesting one to me. And it was the one that was the last one to make sense. And I'm going to try to, my grandfather was an extremely well-connected attorney and politician in New York. And I'll say this and then I'll back up a bit. He would have almost certainly been a Supreme Court justice, which was his goal. But my grandmother, who was this frightening, passive-aggressive narcissist who loved to sabotage people just before their success in any area. So she publicly humiliated him when he was with a group of people that you don't want to be humiliated in front of. I mean, Kissinger, he knew. I could send you a picture of him and Kissinger together.
Right.
And which is interesting because I remember one random evening when I was in my 20s, I was picking up a buddy of mine who had worked in a gas station on the Hutch River Parkway. And I'm there, and Kissinger walks in with a bodyguard. Can't make this up. And just to use the bathroom. But the fact that I was there, I thought this is interesting. Because you hear stories about that, a check-in of this or that. And
Right.
who knows? Because I've learned about, there'll be several gestures or words that can be done together to do something. So again, I don't know. I'm just saying these are possibilities.
Yeah. Right.
But my grandfather also, and I didn't realize this until I had a reunion with my father about 3 years ago, being separated for 26 years. And it was Nelson Rockefeller and Happy's, it was Nelson's wife, were invited to my parents' wedding. And yeah, I mean, and they couldn't, my dad said they were overseas or something.
Yeah.
So they sent over whatever.
Yeah.
And like, this is interesting. This is another piece here. And it's as if even through the strangeness and the panic and the not knowing where I'm going to be, I've been kind of at the same time guided synchronistically with very almost angelic attention amidst the horror to these moments where a dot was given to me. And eventually, you get enough threads, you have a tapestry. That makes sense.
Right.
So
right.
that was part of it. And, he wanted to, I would grow up, he would always say, Jeff, marry a woman that will help you in your career. He would say that. He goes, don't marry. And I was like 6 years old. I'm like, okay, Dad. I'm going to make a note of that. Next time Scooby-Doo yearbook. But, so it's true. So all of those things. And then I remember as a kid, he would say, because he never became what he easily could have and would have if it weren't for my grandmother. So he would reflect back and speak of the days before that.
Right.
When he was something.
Right.
He was involved, like many were, with the Manhattan Project at one point.
Yeah.
So many. So it wasn't like he was one little coterie of 5 people who were doing that. There were thousands. But it was when he told me, and I only realized this recently, he was the attorney, one of the attorneys, at least quietly, for Squeaky Fromme, who had tried to kill President Ford.
Right.
Now, okay, so if Ford had been killed, that would have made Nelson Rockefeller the president. He knew Nelson Rockefeller. So why wouldn't these guys say, okay, Ed, I want you to stay around him, to make him know that you're his attorney, to work with whatever published team there is out there, and you let me know and be my guy there. So he was being groomed for the Supreme Court,
Right.
and not just because of that, but other things too. So I realized that recently, and I'm like, holy heck! I didn't. This is bigger than he alluded to,
Yeah.
or certainly I didn't get it, when I was a child.
Right.
I didn't get it. Listen, I didn't get it, until recently. So I don't really catch on quick, apparently, and that's because it's a screen memory. I don't want to, minimize being silly or
Well,
goofy.
yeah.
To
Well, you
that.
had other things competing for your attention too.
Yeah. Now, which ones are you referring to?
Well, the whole package. I mean, it's like, you don't. What'd you say? Like 9 years, right? You putting the pieces
Well,
together.
yeah.
So it's not like,
Yep.
yeah. It's an
It's been
iterative process. It just doesn't come to you as one piece.
This is true.
Yeah,
This is
you're still writing the book.
yes,
Yeah,
and hopefully, why not just put this out there too? That's part of the plan. That's
yeah,
part of the idea. Like Bryce Taylor has, and other people, they go, okay, I know 99% of the people are going to think I'm nuts, but you know what? That 1% that are so lost, it's going to help them.
right.
So that's groovy for me too. Um, but I wanted to touch on the third screen memory. It was of me in my bedroom at my grandparents' house, and I guess I was within the 3 or 6 range because I had been living there in my mind at that moment, and I was watching this big. It's an elevated black and white and with a big back, like heavy, a TV, and Nixon's face was took up like like basically like as if his face was life size. It was about 6 feet off the ground. And I remember staring at it, and I've said this my whole life. Um, I remember feeling bad for him. I remember like my heart. And I don't think at 3 to 6, I was a very sensitive kid, but I don't think I was able to grasp what was going on enough to have all this empathy spill out for this man I didn't know on my black and white TV. But so I don't know what triggered this association. I think it just kind of bubbled up.
Yeah,
Um, and I thought, holy cow. And I Googled, I said, how tall is Richard Nixon? I Googled it. It's 6 feet tall. That's pretty much exactly how tall the TV was off the ground. And that was alive. I just remember his face and feeling pity. And I thought, holy moly. And I don't know if it was Bryce Taylor or I forget who it was, Kathy O'Brien, about how Nixon abused them.
yeah,
And I thought, okay, so we have Kissinger around, who I run into randomly, pictures of him and my dad. I remember being fascinated by or having this kind of strange interest in Nixon over the years, but I would always go back to the memory of just my heart going out to him, and I thought, I mean, he put the dots together. I don't remember being abused by him. I don't remember in real life seeing him. I would never, ever, sir, elaborate on anything.
yeah,
If anything, I lowball
right.
because I don't want to lose people.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
So but I knew in that moment that I wasn't this most sensitive of all 3.5 or 4-year-olds out there.
yeah,
It was because of that. And so those three memories, and they're all very indicative of somebody who had gone through those things.
right.
Now, I'm gonna throw something at you now that I don't know if my short-term memory is a bit glitchy, but this is in hindsight kind of sealed it for me. In 1996, I the whole story, met a girl, fell in love, moved out west to California with almost no money. So I ended up going to Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, just stunning, modeled after Notre Dame. I quickly became friends with somebody who worked in the ministry. I'm not going to say his name because he was only so lovely and so sensitive and helpful for me. So those folks I protect to what degree I can. So this one guy, and I ended up getting a job there. So I have the keys, the big old master keys, to this glorious cathedral modeled after Notre Dame. Just stupendous, but in a purple robe and a collar, the whole 9 yards. So one day, after barely working there, this guy, Bill Snyder, approaches me. And I mean, just so eager to be my friend. It's as if I'm this celebrity or I'm something. He just wants to shake my hand, and he offers to let me stay with him if anything doesn't work out. And I can even give you the key to my red convertible if you need it. I mean, almost that effusive. And so, interesting. So, my relationship with my girlfriend, that was deteriorating by the second. So, I did end up, having dinner and then going to stay with him. And there was nothing untoward.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, nothing like that. So, but was there? He's talking to me. Oh, you're gonna, So he tells me over dinner that he had worked on Nixon's legal team. Okay, check this out. So he worked on Nixon's legal team, and in what capacity? I guess he didn't go into the details of what drafts he had to do, but he told me about it, and I was, wow, that's interesting. But at that point, I had always been fascinated by and knew there was more behind the scenes in this world. I think the whole JFK thing was my introduction to that reality.
Right.
So I do end up staying with him. So I go over his house, the apartment, and drinking some brandy. And he goes, let me show you something. And this is a friend of mine, he goes, is a writer of espionage novels. And he sends them to me to read through first to make sure there's nothing in there that might be, disclosing state secret, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So and the guy's name, the author's name was E. Howard Hunt.
Okay.
So, yeah. So it's funny. I mean, what? And I swear to God, everything in me, I'm not making this up.
Right.
So I'm listening. This is recently. This is an example of how things connect. Before where I am now, I had this other job, and I listened to whatever all night long. I listened to a St. John interview. St. John is E. Howard Hunt's son. And
Okay.
E. Howard Hunt was one of the most legendary spies in the history of this country.
Yeah.
You can Google him. So St. John is talking, and Popeye's interviewing him, and so St. John starts talking about Bill Snyder, and I'm like, just holy, you know what?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, this is one. I sense the intention behind me being given that understanding, and I'm like, okay, and all these little things were encouraging me to do this with you, and to keep doing it where I can. So St. John is a friend on Facebook. I don't know if I should have said that or not. So I sent him a long note, as cohesively and clearly as I could make myself sound. I think I heard something back briefly, and I'm going to follow up again. But I don't want to ever be pushy.
Yeah. Yeah.
If I knock and you say you can't talk, I'll go away until I'm not going to keep knocking on the window or whatever.
Yeah.
So, that was another piece, and I said, my life is these characters in one way or another are constantly appearing, and I mean there are other sort of little looser that could seem sound incidental, but I don't want to go there because I just want to stay with the hard and fast stuff.
Yeah.
And if you gander down, I can tell you some things that are also interesting. But also, please jump in. I just had a vat of coffee, so so all these things I've had, and then I got a job in New York City. This is where it's a little dicey for me, so I might pull back some because a lot of these guys, they're still alive.
Yeah.
And I will say that I had a friendship, a mentorship, mentor to me, father figure to me, at the time. So I had not really been in contact with my dad for decades. So I was about 38 at the time. So young men who have never been fathered, who were horrifically abused by their mothers, you're so open. There's that. It's like this whole life, vitamin D. Let's say vitamin dad.
Yeah.
You never had any. So you have this,
Right.
So you just run to it when you see it. And so I became, and I'm not going to say his name. I worship this man. I I had so much love. And what's strange, Denny, is I still do, which is strange to me, but I understand it only in the context of programming. But he became my dad. I got an apartment, and he would go shop. He'd go, "Oh, I'll take you to shop," and everything. We would have lunch together every day. We worked together every day. But that was, again, orchestrated. And these things build up over time. When you look back and you reflect over the years, and you realize that so much of your life was a fiction, was a creation, in some ways an illusion, it's hard to process that.
Yeah.
So it's like, so this woman I love, this man that I worship and love, this is all fake. And that takes time to sort out. And I don't know if you can ever really get a grip on it emotionally. I think it's to the point where you accept it.
Right.
And then, like you were saying, you hear other people's experiences, read this and read that, and go, okay, there is per se this community that I am a part of. Yeah. I am not like donut floating in the middle of the ocean who is just so isolated.
Right.
And again, if you have, please interrupt me with questions. I want this to be as helpful and effective as it possibly can be. And I know I can get a buddy of mine says a shiny squirrel, and you go this way, and then you go that way. And I know it's a personal mission. So I do that. So you interrupt me. I don't mind. I want this thing to be refined, so that it's a tool that can maybe, unlock or help people. But that was San Francisco with Bill Snyder. And so my whole life, were these strange, overlaps. And I think the thing with my mentor in New York, well, again, I have this love in my heart for him, which makes no sense. I was listening to an interview about Oswald and George de Mohrenschildt and their relationship. And I heard my relationship with that gentleman. It was just, and I don't know, Oswald was an amazing man. I don't believe, of course, I think if anybody wants to know about Oswald accurately, what I would just refer them to Judith Baker's, was it Me and Lee book? I think she's 1,000% genuine. We've over the years emailed, so that's where I would go with that. But,
yeah, I'm in the middle of reading Haslam's book, and he put a lot.
A Married Monkey?
I'm actually reading it because I'm getting ready to do a channeling with Carl, and Carl is going to channel James Jesus Angleton.
Wow.
So that's one of my research books that I'm reading now. So I'm very interested in what you're talking about because the Kennedy assassination is a seminal event, especially for this country, but also for the world, just like 9/11. And yes, those two things are going to likely get untangled. There's waves of this. That you mentioned one back in the mid '70s when they had a church committee, and they actually had Angleton there testifying before Congress, and he was, he's instrumental in the huge cover-up of the Kennedy assassination. And Mary Meyer, was killed in Washington, and Court Meyer's wife, and Angleton. That was all that Kennedy. That it was all a crowd there, and they covered up a coup basically, and Nixon was involved in that, and and so it's part of the like when I started my YouTube channel, Why Is This True? I had this little byline: reveal and forgive, and it's part of that. Part of what my thinking was is that, well, we have to do healing, but you have to know what needs to be healed. If it's all covered up, just saying you're going to heal something in the dark is meaningless. You have to know the truth, then you know what to forgive. But without knowing the truth first, you're throwing darts in the dark. And you're not going to hit anything. So so I'm very interested in, E. Howard Hunt, uh, this guy Oswald, who, that's a huge story behind how he was used, and he
And
was
he
very
was.
and he was very likely part of a program very similar to what you were involved in. And that's one of the things I want to ask you about. It's like, what do you think their intentions were for you? You kind of went off the
Okay.
reservation, so maybe they were never successful with what they wanted to use you for. But
Well, they got me back,
oh,
through this relationship with not with Demore and Shield. Now, that was like that relationship that Oswald had. I do want to just say, in defense of Lee, is that I believe he was an incredibly good man. I believe he cared about this country. I believe what Judith says about Lee, and I'm getting emotional. He's a guy who had his heart was so in the right place. I don't mean just according to him. I think it was the right place, and he was a tool that was used, eaten up, and spit out.
yeah,
And my heart breaks for him. And
yeah,
I'm so grateful for Judith that she's kept his memory alive.
yeah,
That love conquers in a way.
yeah.
You know, um, so how do they use me? Okay, I'm gonna answer this, but I might, like I didn't say his name. I'm going to avoid certain, like the name of places and such. But I ended up, after meeting this gentleman who became my mentor instantly, almost. I got a job working. Um, it was right across the street from Port Authority. Okay, and the gentleman who owned the business and the facility I was working in owned almost that entire block. Now, if you're talking Manhattan on like 48th, on 48th, what is it? Oh God, I can't believe I'm going blank here. Well, it was essentially like a block from Times Square. It was
Okay,
part of that
okay,
area. So if you know where Port Authority is, it's right across the street. And it was a club, and I became the manager of this club. And it's like, within not long of knowing John, because I had an office with, oh shit. We were working together for 2008 it was Parker Madison. It was Madison. And then 2008 happened, the crash. And then there was some shuffling around. And then we ended up over there. And so also the building was gutted in a way. There were, anybody who worked there, anybody who worked for the larger gentleman who owned the place, who since passed away, could get anywhere they want to underground. I mean, it was just this, labyrinth that they had, and it was theirs. And I should also say, the guy who owned it, what the hell? His name was Richard Bassiano. He was the porn king of New York. And when Giuliani cleaned up and Disneyfied that area,
yeah,
he didn't touch this guy.
okay,
He did an end run. The only thing he asked of this man was that he take any no live sex shows, no live things like that. And there's a big sign to this day, probably, I'm going to guess, no live girls.
yeah,
That's what it's, and that's
yeah,
all he had to do. And then Giuliani just kept on going. So underneath there is that labyrinth. But because this gentleman was an older man, he started out as a boxer when he was younger. He was losing it a bit, kind of going little, and he had married a woman who was, I guess, one of the strippers there who was younger than him. And so between her and his doctor assistant, who's still alive, so I'll probably not say his name. That guy was a Vietnam guy, special something in a doctor or whatever. And there's a picture of him that I had heard about. I didn't see it personally, wearing a necklace with the ears of the young Vietnamese children that he had hacked up.
yeah,
So that gives you an idea of the kind of fella he was.
yeah,
So we have these personages that were more and more people from military and retired intelligence kept coming in. And one day I was asked to drive a gentleman around, who's also alive, still don't say his name, who had worked as a contract agent this sounds so crazy, for CIA when he was under Bush Sr.
Okay.
And this story that was relayed to me by my mentor, and he basically was the guy who came up with the plan and removed Idi Amin
Okay.
from whatever. But I'm getting a little aside. I just wanted to say that these people have always been in my life, interfacing with my life. And also, I was asked to this gentleman, my mentor said, he's got to go through 3 really important appointments, and they can't, do you mind driving him around in this Bentley? And, oh, sure, kind of cool. And so I was told the story about Amin from my mentor, and that was not, he really shouldn't have done that. So when I told him, I said, oh, yeah, I was talking to, and he said he was telling me more about it. And John was like, didn't like that I had said that. So in hindsight, what I was thinking, because we had these conversations, I'm talking to him, he's this big, impressive, bright man. He was about 71 then or whatever. And I in my sense, I was being vetted.
Right.
And that, again, it's interesting. So to answer your question, vetted for what is the question?
Yeah.
I was the manager, so I'm the last guy, right? I'm the last guy out of that club. I do the money drop. My job is done. And so I was reflecting one day about the place and about the characters that were there. And I thought, well, and then I had a friend, I'm not going to say her name. She had worked for, I guess, the military. She was being groomed to be a VP in some big, it doesn't exist anymore, but it was like a Raytheon place.
Yeah.
And so she was targeted, and she was a mess. And I would call her every night, and I was drinking several years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago. And we would both talk and drink. And she shared some things with me. And, I'm getting a little off target. So, I asked her, I said, Carolyn, what do you think is going to be the next false flag? What do you think is going to happen? I mean, they've gotten bigger. We had Waco. We had the Mira building in Dallas, I believe. And then 9/11. So we have these traumas that happen to us as a nation that are larger each time, as traumas tend to need to be. And as a culture, we go into a state of cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
And when you're in that place, you're most open to suggestion. So as country or individual. So she said dirty bomb was what she was thinking. Without really skipping a beat. And so you project, and then I went back to, okay, so we had access to everything under that block. Well, part of that block extends across the street to Port Authority. So more and more people towards the end of my time there who had worked for the government, or retired military, naval, all these things, and people who now had these, lives that were very nice. They owned this company and that company, and there was this interface with the entertainment. That wasn't a Masonic sign, by the way. That was me putting my little wacky fingers together to make But I understand that, because you get very focused on those things. So I thought, holy moly. Oh, by the way, it's funny, the guy who, when we had to go before Congress in '73, but in front of the church committee, the guy that spoke and was acquired to present the case against it or whatever, to defend it in front of Congress or Senate, was Nelson Rockefeller. They chose that's the what in the chicken hen, the whatever.
Yeah. The fox guarding the hen house. It's like it's like Dulles doing the Warren Commission.
Oh, that I know. What a fart! What a fart! It's like having Hugh Hefner work in a convent.
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense.
All right.
But and in my hindsight, also, I thought great ambition has often been a motivation in the past for parents or grandparents to allow their children to be fiddled with or whatever.
Yeah, right.
And so I thought, my grandfather was this extremely ambitious man. Why not? Here's my grandson. Let's seal the deal with that. So, but in his defense, I should say he was the only loving person of a parental
Yeah.
presence.
Yeah.
So look complicated. So I realized, projecting into a few years ago, that I was being set up. That I was, a variant of an Oswald
Yeah.
that was put into a situation that had no family left, that had no siblings, that had, as I do, have some history of psychiatric issues growing up, as one might, being ritually abused. Uh, so they could say, and I was on medication, so they could hit all those things, and people not wanting an answer desperately to resolve that cognitive dissonance and fear
Right. Right.
will
Right. Right.
accept,
Right. Yeah.
you know, and I thought, man, what, what a trip.
Right.
And so I've been talking relentlessly, by the way. So if you need to have a juice here someplace, if you need to interrupt me,
No. No. I will. I'm not shy.
yeah,
um. Yeah. So you answered my question, and I would imagine in the world like that, having more than a few people kind of in your category is always a good move, because if they need to use somebody, they've
yeah,
got several, more than several probably, that they could pick from all over the world to do stuff. And Prouty talks about this in his book, The
yeah,
Secret Team, and so it's not a far fetched. I mean, I think the Manchurian Candidate themes and and Oswald in particular, you know, kind of set the stage for that becoming a plausible scenario in the deep state, in the the dark world, that's finally coming to light about how the CIA operates and all these different underground secret societies and whatnot, the Illuminati, etc. One of the things that I asked you to do in preparation for this was to check out that video that I did with Jian Lian, and I thought she was kind of a mold breaker. And I got to talk to some other people who were older than you, had gone through the very conventional MKUltra kind of programs, Monarch, whatever. And Jian Liang was kind of a standout because she seemed to kind of break that mold, because at least from what I could tell, most of what happened to her as an adult. And I was curious about your thoughts about that, and I wanted you to see that because there's not a whole lot of literature out there about her particular situation. Most of the people that if you're studying this subject, you're going to be talking to people like Elisa E., yourself, Kathy O'Brien, Bryce Taylor, aka Susan Ford, and they're going to tell you stories about the early childhood and the whole trauma-based mind control programs and stuff. And here's Jian Liang comes along, and it appears from her story that just about everything was done remotely.
that's it's interesting because the stuff that I talk about and Bryce and Sue talked about, Kathy, it's so funny. They've been doing this for years,
Right.
and I feel like I'm this new guy with this wacky story, but what you're talking about was for me something I didn't quite accept until after a lot more research, until after a couple of strange experiences myself. I realized that that remote aspect, the technological aspect, is mind-boggling, and because they're so far ahead, what we see, these phones of ours are smart things, or this or that. This is almost like stone knives and bearskin for these people.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
a very accurate statement from what I've learned.
thank you.
Yeah, what we know about is like 30 to 50-year-old technology, and there's stuff
Yes.
they're using now. We simply haven't heard about it yet. It hasn't been, you're not going to go find a patent. You're not going to go find some article buried somewhere. You're gonna find some things that allude to it, like the Jian Liang story, but you're not going to be privy to all the tools at their disposal for doing something like that.
Absolutely. The closest thing I can again point people to for get a real sense of what's going on out there is Aaron and Melissa Dykes at Truth Stream Media.
Okay.
But no, I have hired to plug these people. These who have come into my life through entertainment through videos, YouTube, that are staggeringly brilliant and without question genuine. And it's Aaron and Melissa Dykes at Truth Stream Media.
Okay.
They have a YouTube and a BitChute channel and their website. And they did a documentary about mind control that is head and shoulders, Denny, above anything that's ever been done about MK and that. It's called The Minds of Men. The Minds of Men.
Okay.
And it's on YouTube. I've never seen anything like it. It's a gift to anybody who's a researcher or who's been through it themselves.
All right, I'll check that out.
Yeah, and it's 3.5 hours, I think. But it will hold you because they also know. It's just I just recommend that The Minds of Men, everybody.
Yeah, have you checked into any of Alana Freeland's stuff? She kind of came at it from the chemtrail angle.
Yes, a few of.
Okay.
Yes, I have.
She's got another book coming out, the third book coming out, that's going to get into this. How it's going to be more of the biological aspect of how all that tech starts to interface. I think she's probably going to be getting into Morgellons disease, the black goo phenomenon, nanotech, and it's how it works with the 5G technologies, how it infiltrates the human nervous system. Componentry that has the capability of going through the blood-brain barrier, and basically the whole AI, narrative about how human biology can be taken over by technology, and that thus consciousness. Human consciousness is the prize, of course, has been for thousands of years, and then the stuff that I'm learning now with my affiliation with Carl Mollison at Get Wisdom, crack that egg open even further, stuff that we haven't even gotten into now, but it's the ET aspect. How did humans get a hold of all this extraordinary levels of evil? Where did that come from? Well, at Get Wisdom, we found out about that, and we're getting the straight up story about it. I don't want that aspect to dominate this interview, because I think this interview is full enough with what your experience has been and what you can share with us about the tie-ins. Where is this coming from and why? So that's the other thing I want to ask you is like why you? Why is this happening to you and not somebody else?
I think my grandfather, again, I love him, and he passed in 95. But again, when you're just picked out of daily by, my mother would wake me up cursing and screaming at me, but you're an effing asshole. I mean, that's how every day started. I couldn't make it to school without having massive, forgive me, diarrhea, having to pull over. I was a fragmented wreck. In many ways, still am. In many ways, I still am. I don't talk about it. I don't advertise that. But I have a lot of issues. And so I think it was that. I think that I was if I pull the camera back, there's not a lot of accidents in this life where we're born, all this sort of thing. So that would be, but more specifically, more terrestrially, it would be, my grandfather being an ambitious politician, between the stage being set, the timing, okay. But it wasn't after my birth, because my birth was timed. That doctor was across the street. A lot of weird things like that. I got distracted because a Facebook notification came up on my screen.
Okay.
But it was basically because I was the grandson of my grandfather. That's where I was born.
Okay.
And that, from there. But you do get a lot of tests as you get older. I remember like a couple memories that I do have were of doctors and being given tests. Like, but it doesn't even sound abnormal. But the context makes it dicey.
Right.
And I had a doctor, my growing up, who was still alive, and I was a little kid. And then there was other doctor that I remember only once. And it's funny, I remember him having a classic white coat, black hair, black mustache, like an archetype of that guy.
Right.
And I remember spending some time with him only once, and that was that. And background. This might be fascinating to some people. When I was 11 years old, from 6 to 11, I lived with my mother in Mount Vernon. Not far from my grandparents' house, blocks away. And I was sent without any notice, really, to a boarding school in a town called Madison, Connecticut. The name of the school is Grove, Grove School, Madison, Connecticut. And I was the youngest kid there. I was chubby. I had long hair. I was beaten up every day. And I ran away from there after about 6 months, and I ran home. And it was a freezing wet day. And I got up at the wrong train station, and I had to walk a bit of it, not a huge hill, but some of the hill, to my dragging this suitcase that probably weighed as much as I did, and knocked on my mother's door. And she answered, and this is when the first penny dropped. She goes, "What are you doing here?" And that's when something went off. That's not what I expected and certainly hoped for, And she goes and she calls her mother right away, who I don't want to lose anybody. Well, I'm not going to go there. And then she comes out shortly after and says to me, either you go back to school right now, or I'm going to send you to a mental institute. So I waited in my little 11-year-old brain, and I'm like, well, school's an effing nightmare. How much worse can this possibly be?
Yeah.
You're going to kick my ass twice a day instead of once a day? So I went there, and it was at a brand new facility on a psychiatric, where there's a big hospital, a beautiful area of Westchester. Oh, I mean, just gorgeous. And they had a brand new little wing for kids called Nichols Cottage. I think it's still there. And I was the third person to ever be there. There was a young boy, about 8 or 9. There was a girl, 12. I was 11. She became my girlfriend, as you can be at that age.
Yeah.
You hang.
Yeah.
And now, this is interesting. I looked her up recently because I remember her very well, and I remember because on my 12th birthday she gave me 13 kisses, and I got sent to bed at half an hour earlier. That was a win-win, man. Send me to bed a month earlier. That was fantastic. And so I remembered her fondly all these years, and I looked her up. And she's going through something in a university where she's this very accomplished anthropologist, where she's being targeted. I mean, it is unbelievable what's happening to her. And I thought, what is some collective callback thing? Where these people who were in this place, that would have been like the late 70s, 78, 77, whatever, 79. And I'm like, there is, and again, see, that to me also is a forensic level, per se.
Yeah.
And that broke my heart when I saw that, because there were some blogs accusing her of things. And after 9 years of this, and after lots of research, you can see,
right,
that this is baloney.
Yeah.
And I reached out to her. I sent her an email. I said, are you I said, if this doesn't make any sense to you, whatever, and does this name, and it was Nichols Cottage, make sense to you?
Yeah.
And she said yes, and we wrote, and then I wrote her back, and talking about a little more of what might be going on. And I said, listen, please, I'm not gonna, if you don't want to communicate, it's fine.
Yeah.
And she didn't want to pursue it,
Yeah.
and so I never. So that school, that place, that time in our history, and now I don't. It's a strange thing. It's like they put you out and then you're reeled back in
Yeah.
somehow.
Right.
And so that was that. And please forgive me, I forget. I wanted to digress quickly about this young lady. So, okay, so I was 11. I went to boarding school. I ran away from home. I ran away from the school. I came home, and I was sent to the mental place. But where was I? I'm sorry. Please forgive
That's
me.
okay. It started out like, my question that preceded that was like, why you, and then you said it was mostly because of your relationship with your grandfather, and it was like a donation, it's like
Yeah.
part of the package,
Yep.
Yeah.
And to seal the deal. To
Right.
seal the deal. Here's, young Jeff, fresh out of the oven. Do with him as you will.
Right.
And so yeah, and so that's
So
that was that.
Did you have any brothers and sisters?
No, only child, which in hindsight, I'm very happy about, because my mother, as damaged as she was, because she was sexually abused repeatedly by her brother, who's now dead, my uncle. And so she was a bedridden woman her whole life. When she died, she was literally 605 pounds.
Oh.
And I'm 5'4". I mean, if you want to get an idea of what that looks like, Google who's eating Gilbert Grape, because she was 605 pounds too. So my mother had a horrible life,
Yeah.
Bedridden, abused. She was in the 70s. If you could afford a doctor, if you could afford 20 doctors, you could have them, and they'll eat her prescription.
Yeah.
And she had that, and she stayed in bed. She had this Louis Vuitton purse or pocketbook, or I called it pocketbook as a kid, and it wouldn't close because of the pill bottle.
Yeah.
It was so pill bottles, and she would rarely leave the house. And so yes, she was. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
I just something came up here, and I'm going to cut this out of the video, but I just wanted to tell you, I'm having coffee. I just found out, going to have coffee with Ron McLean in the morning.
Ron McLean. That rings some kind of a bell. Can you refresh me?
That's how you found me.
That's how I found. I knew there was a bell. Oh God! Did you tell him?
I see him maybe once every 4 or 5 months, and
wow.
he just texted me right now, coffee in the morning, and I don't know if he knows about you, but he will tomorrow. I'm going to cut this out because I don't want people to know that I'm meeting him, so this will be cut out of our interview. But in fact, I better write down the timestamp here, 1:15, so I know where to cut it.
Give him I never shook his hand. I've not had the honor yet. But my heart, he is such a lovely, beautiful soul.
Yeah.
So cool, so kind, so honest.
Yeah.
So if you could send him a hug for me or
yeah,
whatever.
I will. I'll see him in the morning. I'm going to
Please.
see him in the morning for coffee. Yeah.
Yep, send him a hug.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I'll cut that little part out, and then so let's continue with what do you see as the end game for the purpose of doing something like this with other humans?
Of the end game of
mind control, of recruiting people like yourself, where you could be useful for the purposes of evil. Is that even accurate? Maybe that's not accurate. Maybe there's some other game plan afoot. Maybe there's some other goal with all this. But what do you think? Yeah. What do you think the purpose of all this is?
Well, I think evil is, because it's a completely anti-human, completely devoid of empathy. There's nothing. It's like a black tapestry. It is a horrific program, and eventually it is. I think the powers that shouldn't be love being puppet masters, and they love puppet mastering our life. Right. And now with technology, it was as if, you know, we could have this taken, we can have our bodies hacked, we can have our neurochemistry, we can be influenced via frequency, all of these things. But there has been until recently this area inside, which was ours, our soul or whatever, or we could think our own thoughts if we wanted to in the face of adversity. But now that, thank you, Elon Musk, thank you for Neuralink. When I say thank you, obviously I'm being facetious.
Yeah, right.
That they're going into our heads now. They're going into our minds.
Right.
So to have a planet, which in the depopulation plans are absolutely real.
Yes.
To have several 100 million people left alive who are literal automatons for their use, for their entertainment, for their pleasure, sexually and otherwise, that would be their Elysium, their heaven. And I think it's that simple in a way.
Okay.
But I think we're used, and I think we're used to push that agenda in place, and we're also used sexually.
Right.
When I was at that place when I was 11 years old, 11 to 12, this is good that we're talking about this. I remember this young girl coming into my room, and I'm 11 years old, and she was a little older, maybe 13-ish, and she comes and she lifts up her dress. Now, this is a small hallway that always has staff members sit. They always do. So how did she get out of her room, get into my room, and lift up her dress? See, child pornography is very, very much a part of this.
Yes.
And of course, that's pedophilia.
Right.
So, and to mirror that in an even more disturbing way, I grew up being a ravenous Star Trek fan. I just love Star Trek. I have pictures of William Shatner. This is Bill and a Fraser. This is him kissing a girl. And there's in my wallet that clear little thing with the pictures. It was only Captain Kirk on the wall. Star Trek programming is in Fritz's book. When I read that was like one of the things that cinched it up for me. So I'm 14, about 14 or 15. I'm at a convention in New York City, and this girl, a couple of years older than me, comes over. And I cannot remember for the life of me how we first met each other. I don't know. And usually those things would stand out because when you're young, a pretty girl comes, more parts of the brain get engaged and the memory becomes more solid.
Right.
So, but I remember ending up in her hotel room, and nothing happened, though it could have, but I was so frightened. I was sitting on the end of the bed with my Star Trek uniform on, really nervous, and so I've always, because I would have lost my virginity at a Star Trek convention, and in my wacky life, that would have made sense, and I would have thought, yeah, it's kind of cool, and nothing happened. But her bedroom, or the hotel room, I remember thinking at the time, okay, I guess her parents, or they're there, they've wandered off or something. But I remember there being one bed in this good-sized hotel room. So why does this 14 or 15-year-old kid have her own huge bedroom, like a boudoir at a Star Trek convention?
Right.
And then I said, this is kind of that little niche thing.
Yeah.
Young teenage kids in Star Trek uniforms having sex, you could see that as having appeal.
Right.
So I'm like, wow, this is, in hindsight, again, only recently did I realize it, because I remember this could be a fake, this could be just me, I don't know, but like mirrors in the room. And what goes behind the mirror? Okay. So there's that. So the sexual component is huge.
Yeah.
Because it's blackmail, or desire, for what, emotional manipulation too, for love, the whole Romeo honey trap thing. And I don't want to get too lost from your question. There is another story about the sexual aspect of it.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, just read the literature. There's I have a list of books that for anybody who expresses an interest in this mind control thing, it's like, well, why is that? Why was that such an epiphany for you? And I said, well, the books pretty much tell the story. So I sent him this list. I sent the list to you too. It's all these books,
And they're,
that if you read them, you're going to go, oh my gosh, there's a whole part of this world that's staring us in this face. That's once you know about it, it's uncovered. But if you don't do the research, it stays covered, and it never becomes part of your consciousness. You never realize that it's ingrained in every institution. Entertainment is so loaded up with this stuff. It's inconceivable, and then everything else, education system, all the themes that turn into tools for programming, like you just mentioned, Star Trek, all of Disney, everything Disney's ever touched, gets
evil company.
Yeah, gets pulled into that, and so it's a worthwhile education. I mean, that's one of my motivations for doing interviews like this is that, we're lucky now because we do have the internet, and you could learn a lot more in a shorter period of time than you could when all you had was books. But books still remain a real important part of all this, because one of the reasons I think that's true is because if you sit down to write a book, most authors are going to be a little bit more careful about what they put in print, because a lot of that tends to outlive you. So you tend to be a little bit more careful. That's not true across the board, but in general, the quality of information is maybe a notch or two higher than if you just went on a pure internet, internet-based education. So the quality is a little bit better with books, I think.
Well, and I think you're never going to get to a place of real understanding watching a YouTube video. I think you can be inspired and ignited on the trail of truth and get loads, but these are peripheral to the substance, which is only, pardon me, found in books.
Yeah.
Just have to dig in. But the answers, they are there. And so research is a deeply important component to this, to your own freedom, shall we say.
Right.
I thank God.
That's the prize, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love research. I've been a research junkie my whole life, whether it was about Star Trek or Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Loch Ness. So I would read multiple books, and I would make notes and collate, correlate. So that was part of me from the earliest on.
Yeah.
Thank God.
So what's happening in your life right now? Like what?
A lot of targeting. I mean, for the longest time, it would come in waves. And I think part of what the waves would do is, like, if you're at sea, if you're in the ocean or the water, I'm not I've spent much time in the sea, but the waves will push you in a certain direction. I think, I've described it myself and externally sometimes as like you're in a tube of toothpaste, and you could point the tube someplace and squeeze it, and the toothpaste will land in a certain area. That's what my life has been like, perhaps forever, but I think you do. There is, like in the Truman Show, which is the movie, if you're targeted, that and The Game and The Lives of Others, or the big ones. And, when Truman woke up to the fiction of it, then you're not predictable. And then when you veer off the course, things will happen to push you back in. This is a massive societal program that's run from the very top, that is soulless, anti-human. I've had to learn to think of it almost as in a special sense. Like, they are not of the same species. So I have to stop projecting the empathy and decency onto them.
Yeah, anthropomorphizing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's gotten very bad again. My living situation is not good. I'll put this out there. It's not a safe situation. It's somebody that I met through a guy who was a retired lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, and they said, but you leave the devil you know for the devil you don't know. That's loosely how I got here.
Yeah.
But it's bad. It's not a good guy. I'll even go as far as say his cover is as a minister, which is the cover of choice for people who are in this business. I'm not saying there aren't real ministers out there.
Yeah.
But they're few and far in between.
Yeah.
I'll say that. They're few and far in between. It's the perfect cover because for the narcissist or whomever, or somebody who is a programmed multiple,
right.
That was part of my plan to answer your question 9 hours later after you asked it.
Okay.
I went to Bible school to be a minister when I was 25 to 27. And right next door to me, to this apartment that I had at one point, was this beautiful, wonderful woman who worked for the Department of Justice, which is interesting. And when I first met her, she came to the door wearing only a forest green, like silk nightshirt. And it's like the middle of the day on a weekend, And I'm like, in hindsight, in present tense, I thought, how cool is this? At 25. And now in hindsight, it was kind of smarmy or something. But I graduated there in 94. And weeks before my graduation, I was a busboy or a waiter at the Outback Steakhouse in Tulsa. It's in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And this attorney comes over to me, gives me his card, tells me he wants to support my ministry. I didn't have a ministry at all. And I didn't even hand out socks in the cold weather to people. I had nothing, and so I believe very kind words. It'd be nice to have that business card. Still, I don't. And so the preparation was there to pull me into that line of work. And I would have gone in there, Denny, and I would have probably done well, but had no idea that was this lifelong plan for me. Sorry, and that cough was not anything to anybody, because I get that every day of my life. I get people constantly doing that around me, at work too, all the time. So especially, forgive me, the charismatic. I call the charismatic branch of whatever the charismatic intelligence agency, which is also CIA.
Yeah.
And sure, but it's not. It's everywhere though.
Yeah.
Wall. There's no area that's not been very successfully infiltrated.
Yeah.
That was the component there that happened, and also I remember the principal or whatever you call him of the school at that time was one of the first guys, Air Force guy, who flew the X-15 experimental aircraft. So, the entertainment business, ministry, and intelligence, there's this very black trifecta that is this constant overlapping. Ministry, intel, and entertainment.
Yeah.
It's the cover. It's the best cover as a minister. I do want to say, there was a minister that I knew in New York, in Yonkers by the Bronx. He was the real deal, one of the very few in my whole life I've met. And he would talk about 9/11, the truth about it from the pulpit. I mean, he just was this tough kid from the Bronx that could not. I'm not going to say his name, because I would ask him first. But I thank God for him, But yeah, so I still take him as my pastor, and I called him Pastor Bob. And Pastor Bob, you are aces, man. If anybody wants to go to a church, you're the only one that I can recommend in the world.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I'm getting lost in the woods here.
No. I was asking about what's happening for you now.
Oh,
the targeting and so you're.
Sorry.
So you're in Denver now.
I am in Denver. I've been here for a few years, and I had work with a homeless community here, not as a homeless person, but which could happen very soon, which I don't like because I have this car, which is a blessing, but it's old and it has some issues. I guess as we all do as the years go by.
Yeah.
And if I had to live in it, I could live in it. I was working in this very famous mission here in Denver, and eventually it seemed after a few years that I was not to be there. And things changed very quickly. There was a vicious slander campaign that went out that in hindsight or in present tense was obviously that I was some kind of pedophile or drug dealer. And because this one guy came on the scene and has since left, but he pushed things to a degree that was, I couldn't sustain it. Then I went from there to one of the satellite shelters. It was horrible there. And I gave my letter of resignation. Then I went to another job that was a complete setup. And then now I'm back at the mission.
Okay.
Where I am. And because the director, was she didn't obviously, I hate saying it, like she wasn't a part of it.
Yeah.
We had coffee and she was so happy she wanted to have me back. So I went to this special school thing about peer navigation. But now, again, it is so clear that I am not wanted. I don't know. I've done nothing. I know all targets say that. I've done nothing. There's nothing I've ever done that no one doesn't know about.
Yeah.
So I'm being pushed out of there. I'm meeting with an old landlord where I was prior to this tomorrow to try so I could leave here because here is bad. It's very bad here. And targets will often find themselves living with, because they aim the toothpaste.
Yeah.
Living in situations that are just mind F's.
Yeah.
So, I leave the house, and it can be so extreme. But I'm starting to write something that maps it out, how it makes some degree, how they're able to. Some of the coordination that happens is so almost beyond being able to be orchestrated.
Yeah.
That there's a I guess for me
there's a multi-dimensional aspect to it.
Thank you. I didn't want to say that, but exactly.
But if you're not versed in it, it just sounds nuts. If you try to explain it to someone who's not, given it some thoughtful study beforehand, it's really hard to it's really hard to convey it to someone who's just coming at it green, and you, like you say, it's designed that way so that when you talk about it in terms of how it's real for you, you just come across like somebody who's suffering from some sort of a mental illness. And that,
absolutely.
And I know that, but it's helped me because I know what to look for.
Huh? You're doing it. You're very, very, very good at what you're doing.
Thank you.
I mean, and I'm not trying to be obsequious or whatever.
Yeah, no.
But you're really.
Thanks. Yeah, and there's obviously something in my past, whether it's a previous life or something, where I'm drawn to these people. These people are drawn to me, and it extends into the world of what we call MAP, which is an acronym that kind of takes the place of SSP, Secret Space Program. We call it the Mercenary Army Program, and I found out, going on this path, that people would be drawn to me and then find out that they were MAP. They didn't know it, but then through their association, they would be able to say, okay, well, and a lot of times I wouldn't realize it until after the fact, that someone had contacted me because of that, but the fact was only revealed, down the road, and I had not suspected it myself. And
is there an overlap between MAP and again, that's not an overlap between that and the whole super soldier program?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wanted to be to
yeah. And unfortunately, so many of these people who claim to be part of that, irrespective of their core beliefs about what its purpose would be, have a similar background of the Illuminati type programming or the MKUltra type programming or variants thereof.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It's pretty common. I mean,
yeah, it's pretty common. And the other thing that's really under, the people who come public are the people who kind of set the bar for everything else that goes around them, which is kind of misleading because the majority of these people don't even know that they're part of it.
it's interesting.
They
Yeah,
will live.
I'm
They will live out their lives, and they will never consciously know that they were part of the program. That's the
Isn't that
majority.
amazing? You're in
Yeah.
a TV show your whole life,
Yeah.
and you don't even know the TV show. The Truman
Yeah.
Show.
Right. Right. They
Uh,
they acclimate to the fact that they wake up in the morning and they're tired. They feel like they've been out running around all night, or they have a bruise on their knee, or their neck hurts or
Yeah.
something,
mhm.
without no explanation for it. But it becomes normal life, and part of that normal life is established when they're young. And this
Yes.
this whole 20 and back thing, I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's common. That's how
20 and
yeah, they take you when you're young. They take you out of time, out of your life. You serve it's in a military capacity. It's very common amongst military families. You serve in a military capacity as what they perceive as an off-planet type soldier. And then they're regressed, plugged back into their normal life, and then they live on. And then some of them will be taken periodically in the rest of their life, continuing on from that point after the 20 back, depending on a variety of factors. One being that the mind control part of it, the asleep part of it, works well, and in most cases it does. The people we hear about are the ones that are able to exploit the crack in the egg, so to speak. They have a memory. They start putting their timeline back together, and then they become less useful for what their,
Yeah.
purpose is,
You wake up.
and they might wash out. But unfortunately, the washing out part of it looks very similar to what happens when someone's from a program like what you're talking about.
You get killed. You get thrown
Yeah,
from the
you
freedom.
You get killed, or you get put into an institution, or you become mentally debilitated to a point that you're no longer a threat, only to yourself.
Yeah.
And
You're wandering
yeah,
a shelter and
right. So
a,
yeah, so that's but see that they are the key to unlocking real consciousness for this is my theory, for the rest of the population of the world. Unless the rest of the population of the world embraces what's going on in those realms and understands that what's going on in those realms is real and
Yes.
more real than what they're experiencing, they will remain asleep.
well, I think that's why truth is being murdered now so quickly. Whistleblowers were once well thought of in this country. Now, if you do that, you're an enemy of the state,
Mm-hmm.
and we will grab you and extradite you and torture you and kill you.
Right.
And that says something. That sends a message.
Right.
Assange sends a message to other journalists whose conscience might be growing and,
Right.
and need.
Yeah.
And because the truth is powerful.
Yeah.
Darkness doesn't run from light. Darkness doesn't expose light. Light shows you where the roaches are and
Right.
who's who.
Right.
And so they are not this all-powerful, unopposable force.
Right.
They are panicking the truth because the truth spreads, and they can't afford to have everybody wake up.
Yeah.
And they hide behind all these manipulations to keep people asleep, whether it's fluoride or propaganda or whatever it may be.
Right. So
But there's power in the truth. Yes, sir.
there's power in truth, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, this whole reveal and forgive thing, which then ties into what I'm doing now, is that for their a sense of powerlessness in the face of what is being exposed is a natural and normal human reaction to this. So no one should be. A lot of times they'll get things mixed up. They say, "Well, if this makes me feel disempowered, it must not be true." That's wrong. It's an incorrect way of thinking about it. One of the reasons I'm involved with Get Wisdom, and primarily where most of my energies go right now, and not in doing interviews like I'm doing with you tonight, is because there is an answer for all of this. There is something that you can do about it, and that's what we teach at Get Wisdom. So I'm going to plug, on your nickel, I'm going to plug Get Wisdom, because I don't want people to see this interview and go away with the feeling like, oh gosh, well this is much worse than what I thought. We're screwed. There's nothing I can do about it. Well, that's not true. There is something you can do about it. And if that kind of talk interests you, then jump on over to Get Wisdom to see what we have to say about it. And it's just an open invitation. It's not, a lot of people will go there and they say, oh, well, this is just nuts. This is crazy. These people are even crazier than that guy, Jeff, and that's okay. That's okay. But I just want to put it out there because I don't want people to feel a sense of futility if what you're telling them, hits pay dirt for them, makes them think that, okay, these guys are onto something.
No, there is the sense of learned helplessness that you were talking about. It is very, and it is a natural thing. What really gives that an unfortunately sort of solid foundation that makes it hard to get past is when you're traumatized and you're abused sexually when you're young, whether you remember it or not, the shame component.
Yeah.
There's this woman, she wrote a book about SRA, and the first sentence in the first page is shame rules the victim. Shame rules the victim.
Right.
And shame and fear, that's not the wind that you want in your sail.
No.
It's shame and fear.
Right.
Because you're going to go to the rockiest, most shark-infested waters that you can think of. But like you were saying, that how to have the forgiveness component.
Yeah.
That will protect you. That will be the GPS on your ship to keep you away from the sharks and rocks.
Yeah.
And there are ways, even in the darkest times when you're wandering Arizona like I was with sandals and it was cold at night. But in those moments, you're not alone. I mean, you're really not.
No.
You might feel it. It might seem that way. But there are things that in this universe that we live in that conspire for us.
Right.
And to see that is a challenge sometimes. And it may be impossible sometimes. But there's never reason to take yourself out of the game.
No.
I think those thoughts will come to us at times, as they have to me.
Yeah.
But they go. There's no reason for that. We are not alone. You don't have to do that.
Right.
That's why I love what you're doing. I love this dialogue. I love that others are doing it. Because when we see ourselves and hear ourselves, there's an alchemy that takes place that's healing, that's restorative, that provides us with Maslow's, the need for community.
Right.
Even if it's not in person, it's this.
Yeah.
Soul to soul, time and space, our souls and spirit are not bound by.
Right.
So if you're out west and I'm here, this connection is still as genuine and as transformative.
Right.
So, that's all I wanted to
say. And it's kind of interesting, too, because it's not really time bound because, there's a level of inspiration that we could both be experiencing now, and then somebody watching this 3 months from now could get that same. That essence will still come through. Thanks to video or thanks to some other etheric law out there. I'm not really sure exactly what it is, but I agree with you. That's been my experience with this, and that's one of the reasons I like videos so much because you can kind of, you can look into their eyes and see, is this real or is it Memorex?
It's real.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, I want to thank you for doing this with me so much.
Thank you.
and
so much.
and it may warrant a follow up, which I'm totally open to at some point, because
Sure.
invariably I do an interview like this, and you look at it and you go, that's what I forgot to talk about. So I always leave the door.
Yeah.
I leave the door open for that, because I've done that before. We have had a follow up interview because we realized, there's these other things we should have talked about. But we're crawling up onto the hour and 45-minute mark. So in honor of the people who can only tolerate videos less than 2 hours, we'll wrap it up. And I want to thank you so much for doing this with me.
Thank you.
And it's nice to have another video out there for Why Is This True? I don't do this very much anymore, but thanks to all my, I guess I have 4,600 subscribers out there, and a lot of them have hung in there with me despite the paucity of videos that I've been putting out lately, just because I've been busy at Get Wisdom. But so thank you, Jeff. And
if anybody wants to contact me, or if they feel that they're alone and they have their smartphone, but they're in a shelter, they're overwhelmed, I have no problem. I'm going to go out there, give my email out.
Okay.
I don't care.
All right, I'll put it. It'll be in the description in the video here, so you can get a hold of if Jeff, and then and that's how Jeff got a hold of me, by leaving a comment on one of the videos that I did with Ron, and that's how we hooked up. So and I followed up. I'm not going to follow up with everybody, but sometimes there's something that clicks, and I go, you left the link of the video that you did, and I went and watched it, and I went, okay, I got to interview this guy.
Thank you. And thank you. I mean, it touches my heart that you're doing this. When I watched you, I was like, my God, the sensitivity, the intelligence, but also to know the questions to ask. You're a gift.
Oh, thank you.
You are a gift.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Really do.
My pleasure.
Okay, well, thanks, everybody, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.